You have probably been told your whole life that tolerance is a cornerstone of being a good person. It's held up as the ultimate sign of open-mindedness, a virtue we should all be striving for. It's what keeps the peace and allows us to live with diversity. But what if that's only half the story? What if, on a deep psychological level, tolerance isn't always a virtue? What if it's a form of self-abandonment in disguise? A quiet deal you make to erase your own needs just to keep things from getting messy. Let us be honest about the definition. To tolerate something means to endure or put up with it, often something you dislike or disagree with. It can look like kindness and feel like virtue, but sometimes it's a weapon you're aiming at your own well-being. Today, we're not just talking about societal tolerance. We're talking about your mind. We're going to uncover the 5 surprising ways your instinct to be tolerant might be tricking you, eroding your boundaries, and costing you your sense of self. First up, tolerance can trap you into feeling like your very existence is conditional. This is especially true for the person being tolerated. When you're tolerated, you aren't being accepted. You're being endured. Psychologically, this feels like you've been given temporary, shaky permission from a dominant group to live your life, but only as long as you don't make a fuss. Imagine living in a house where the landlord docentee truly wants you there but puts up with you. You pay your rent. You're quiet, but you live with a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety. You know, any perceived misstep a party that's too loud, a disagreement over parking could get you kicked out. That's the psychological state of being tolerated. It's a constant threat that is psychologically taxing and undermines your autonomy. This experience is psychologically taxing and aligns with what's known as minority stress. There's this persistent fear that the majority group might revoke this permission at any moment. This constant awareness that your way of life could be challenged if it upsets the dominant group is a heavy psychological burden. You start to second-guess your actions. Not because they're wrong, but because you fear they might cross an invisible line and risk the fragile peace. This isn't freedom. It's a cage with invisible bars, built from the quiet disapproval of others. It tricks your mind into believing your security depends on staying small, an unobtrusive, dangerous illusion that stifles true growth and self. The second mental trick of tolerance is the ambiguity tax. Outright rejection hurts, but at least it's clear. You know where you stand. Genuine acceptance feels good because it affirms your value. Tolerance, however, lives in a confusing, stressful middle ground. It looks like acceptance on the surface you're being included, but it carries the underlying negative attitude of rejection. This ambiguity is incredibly draining. When someone tolerates you, they're sending 2 conflicting messages. I will allow you to be here, and I secretly disapprove of who you are. Your brain has to constantly work to decipher this mixed signal. Do they like me? Do they hate me? Am I safe? This uncertainty chips away at fundamental psychological needs for belonging, esteem, and control. Psychological studies have explored this gray area. They've found that being tolerated can be surprisingly damaging to your well-being, sometimes feeling closer to outright discrimination than genuine acceptance. That polite smile, paired with disapproving eyes, can be more damaging than an open frown. Think of it like a faulty smoke detector that beeps randomly. At first, you're on high alert, but over time, the constant, unpredictable noise just becomes a source of chronic stress. You can't relax, but you can't locate the fire either. This is the ambiguity tax of tolerance. It's the mental exhaustion of navigating a social world where you are included but not valued, seen but not respected. It tricks you into paying a heavy price for a peace that's superficial at best. The third way tolerance deceives you is by silencing your voice. When you know you're being begrudgingly included, a deep-seated fear takes root. The fear of losing that tolerance. As a result, both individuals and groups who feel merely tolerated often become less willing to voice dissatisfaction or advocate for themselves. Why would you complain about the terms of your inclusion when you feel your very inclusion is at risk? You end up in a vicious cycle. You smother your own voice to avoid rocking the boat. You don't demand better treatment or push for full acceptance, because the implied message of tolerance is, be grateful for what you get. This passivity, born from self-preservation, ends up reinforcing the very inequality it's trying to survive. You can't fix a problem you're too scared to name. This has devastating long-term effects on yourself. When you consistently suppress your needs and opinions to maintain a fragile peace, you start to internalize the belief that your voice just doesn't matter. You're effectively teaching yourself that your thoughts are secondary to the comfort of the person or group tolerating you. Think about a work meeting where you have a dissenting opinion, but you know your boss merely puts up with your unconventional ideas. You stay silent, not because your idea is bad, but because you've calculated that the social cost of speaking up is just too high. Each time you do this, you trade a piece of your authentic self for perceived security. Tolerance tricks you into accepting this as a wise trade. It frames self-silencing as a smart survival strategy, rather than what it is, a slow erosion of your power and your right to advocate for your own value. Tolerance doesn't just trick the person being tolerated, it also lays a trap for the bystander. This fourth trick is the moral distress that comes from tolerating intolerance. In the name of being open-minded or avoiding conflict, we often stand by and allow harmful things to happen, discriminatory jokes, or subtle acts of exclusion without saying a word. This is the paradox of tolerance in action. By tolerating speech and actions designed to harass and intimidate, we inadvertently enable harm. The bystander who hears a casually racist comment and says nothing, or the friend who listens to a misogynistic joke without challenging it. These individuals often feel a profound sense of guilt, helplessness, and internal conflict. The psychological trap here is the belief that your inaction is a neutral stance. Ite, not. Silence in the face of intolerance often signals complicity to both the perpetrator and the victim. It creates a toxic culture of anxiety where bad behavior is normalized. People often rationalize their inaction by thinking someone else will step up, or they fear becoming a target themselves. A perfect example of the bystander effect. But this passivity comes at a cost to your own integrity. It forces you into a state of cognitive dissonance, where your value of fairness clashes with your behavior of inaction. This internal conflict is a heavy burden to carry. Overcoming this requires a reframing intervention, not as an act of aggression, but as an act of restoring integrity. It's about learning to target the behavior, not the person, and speaking for yourself by saying something as simple as, "I'm not comfortable with that language." It's a shift from being a passive, tolerant bystander to an active, respectful ally. The final, and perhaps most personal, trick of tolerance is the toll it takes on the one doing the tolerating. We often think of tolerance as a passive act of just putting up with something, but what's really happening inside? For many, tolerating a person or situation they disapprove of requires actively managing their own negative feelings, like anger, disgust, or shame. The ability to sit with these difficult emotions without acting on them is a psychological skill known as affect tolerance. But if you have low affect tolerance, fancy way of saying you understand, feeling uncomfortable emotions, you have to get rid of that feeling somehow. This leads to some pretty unhealthy emotional strategies. One is suppression, where you just stuff your feelings down, pretending they don't exist. This might work for a minute, but in the long run, it can lead to anxiety and depression as the unprocessed emotions fester. Another strategy is to act out, transforming the discomfort into rage or projecting it onto others, which just creates more conflict. Someone with poor affect tolerance might tolerate a family member's political rants by silently fuming, only to snap at their partner later over something trivial. They haven't processed their anger. They've just redirected it. True emotional resilience doesn't come from suppressing or avoiding feelings, but from developing the capacity to experience them without being overwhelmed. Tolerance, in this sense, tricks you into believing that endurance is the same as strength. It encourages you to bottle up negative emotions under a lid of civility. But that pressure has to go somewhere. The true path to resilience isn't passive endurance. It's the active development of emotional skills that allow you to engage with difficult situations from a place of grounded strength, not unprocessed turmoil. So, let's recap. Tolerance can be a trap, making you feel conditional, taxing your mind with ambiguity, silencing your voice, burdening you as a bystander, and wrecking your own emotional regulation. Each of these tricks operates under the guise of virtue, which makes them incredibly hard to spot. Have you ever paid a high price for being too tolerant, either of others or of a situation? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be the permission someone else needs to see this pattern in their own life. Ultimately, this is not a call to become intolerant. It's a call to move beyond mere tolerance toward genuine acceptance where possible, and to draw firm, clear boundaries where it's not. It's about understanding that acceptance is an embrace, while tolerance is merely an endurance. An enduring poison doesn't make you strong, it makes you sick. The goal is to stop abandoning yourself for the sake of a superficial peace. It's about reclaiming your voice, protecting your well-being, and building relationships based on authentic respect, not grudging forbearance. And that is an act of profound self-respect. If this video opened your eyes and you're ready to explore more unspoken rules of psychology, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's next.